The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the kind that clings to your lungs and makes every breath feel like a secret whispered by the forest. I stood on the porch of my cabin, the wood creaking under my boots, staring down Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the Pinewood Hills Homeowners Association. Her face was a storm cloud, all sharp angles and righteous fury, her manicured nails jabbing the air like tiny daggers. "You will open this cabin for inspection, Daniel Harper, or I'll have the board fine you into oblivion." Her voice screeched like a fork dragged across a plate, loud enough to scatter the birds from the pines. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, the weight of her demands pressing against my chest like a boulder. This wasn't about the cabin. It was about control, and I was done playing her game. 3 years ago, I'd bought this place, a rickety, cedar-shingled cabin tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, to escape. Escape the city, the noise, the endless churn of people telling me who I should be. Pinewood Hills was supposed to be a quiet community, a refuge for folks who wanted space to breathe. But Karen, she didn't believe in breathing room. She believed in rules. Her rules. The Homeowners Association bylaws were her Bible, and she wielded them like a televangelist with a vendetta. First, it was my mailbox, too rustic for her taste. Then, my truck's mud-splattered tires lowered property values. Now, she was obsessed with my cabin, convinced I was hiding something because I'd refused her routine inspection. Routine, my ass. She just wanted to snoop, to dig her claws into my life and tear it apart for sport. I sighed, the sound heavy in the crisp morning air, and rubbed the back of my neck. "Karen, I've told you before, this is private property. You don't get to barge in because you feel like it." My voice was low, steady, but there was a fire licking at the edges. I could feel it in my pulse, the way my fingers twitched at my sides. She stepped closer, her perfume, a cloying mix of lavender and entitlement, stinging my nose. "You think you're above the rules, don't you?" she hissed, her eyes narrowing to slits. "I know you're hiding something in there. Unapproved renovations, illegal tenants, drugs, maybe." She spat the last word like it was venom, and I almost laughed. Drugs? The only thing I was hiding was a half-finished novel and a bottle of bourbon I hadn't touched in months. I opened my mouth to tell her to get lost when a new sound cut through the tension. A low, throaty rumble, like a bear waking up from hibernation. A black SUV rolled up the gravel drive, its tires crunching like bones underfoot. Karen froze, her tirade derailed, and I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe whoever this was would distract her long enough for me to slip back inside and lock the door. The SUV stopped, and the driver's door swung open. Out stepped a woman I didn't recognize, her auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun, her suit crisp despite the mountain dust. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking like gunshots on the gravel. "Mr. Harper?" she called, her voice calm but commanding, like she was used to being heard. I nodded, wary. Karen's eyes darted between us, her lips pursing like she'd sucked a lemon. "I'm Elise Carter, aide to Governor Reynolds," the woman said, extending a hand. My stomach did a slow flip. The governor? What the hell was this about? I shook her hand, her grip firm, and caught Karen's jaw drop from the corner of my eye. "The governor's here for a private meeting," Elise continued, glancing at Karen like she was a mosquito buzzing too close. "He's waiting inside." Inside. My cabin. My blood ran cold. I hadn't let anyone in there since I moved in. Not neighbors, not delivery guys, nobody. And now the governor of North Carolina was sitting in my office? I swallowed hard, the taste of panic bitter on my tongue. Karen's face twisted, her cheeks flushing a blotchy red. "This is outrageous," she snapped, her voice climbing an octave. "You can't just—" Nobody informed the Homeowners Association about this. All visitors must be pre-approved. Elise raised an eyebrow, unfazed, and I felt a spark of admiration. "Ma'am," she said coolly, "the governor doesn't need your permission to conduct state business." Karen sputtered, her hands flailing like she was trying to swat away the insult. I didn't wait for her to regroup. I turned and strode toward the cabin, my heart hammering against my ribs. Whatever was waiting inside, it was bigger than Karen's tantrum. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the familiar smell of old wood and coffee wrapping around me like a hug. My office was a mess, papers strewn across the desk, a cracked mug sitting on a stack of books, the faint hum of my ancient laptop filling the silence. And there, in my worn leather armchair, sat Governor Thomas Reynolds himself, his silver hair catching the sunlight streaming through the window. He looked up from a folder in his lap, his eyes sharp but kind, like a grandfather who could still outsmart you at chess. "Daniel," he said, his voice warm but edged with urgency. "Sorry for the surprise. We need to talk." I closed the door, shutting out Karen's indignant squawking. My mind raced. I wasn't political. I didn't vote in the last election. Too busy trying to keep my head above water after the divorce. Why was the governor here? Elise slipped in behind me, her presence quiet but steady, like a shadow that knew more than it let on. "Sit," Reynolds said, gesturing to the couch. I obeyed, the springs groaning under my weight. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and the air in the room shifted, heavy with something unspoken. "I read your book," he said, and my heart stopped. My book, the one I'd self-published a decade ago, a gritty crime novel nobody bought. "It's why I'm here." I blinked, my mouth dry. "My book." My voice cracked, and I hated how small it sounded. Reynolds nodded, tapping the folder. "The corruption you wrote about, the land deals, the bribes, the shell companies, it wasn't just fiction, was it?" My stomach churned. I'd based the novel on rumors I'd heard back in Raleigh, whispers of dirty deals in the mountains. I thought I'd been clever, hiding the truth in plain sight. But now the governor was staring at me like I'd cracked open Pandora's box. "We're investigating a real estate syndicate," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "And your cabin? The sitting on land they want. Badly." The pieces clicked together, sharp and jagged. Karen's obsession with my property. The HOA's sudden inspections. She wasn't just a nosy busybody. She was their pawn. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palms. "Karen's involved, isn't she?" I asked, the words tasting like bile. Reynolds nodded, his jaw tight. "We think she's been feeding them information, pressuring owners to sell. Your refusal to let her in? It's why they're getting desperate." A crash outside jolted me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Karen, red-faced and wild, slamming her fist against the SUV's hood. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice carrying through the glass. "I'll call the police. I'll sue." Elise sighed, a long, tired sound, and moved toward the door. "I'll handle her," she said, but there was a glint in her eye, like she was itching for a fight. I turned back to Reynolds, my pulse roaring in my ears. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice steadier now, fueled by a spark of defiance. He smiled, a slow, dangerous thing. "Testify. Help us bring them down." The next hour was a blur. Reynolds laid out the plan. I'd go public, use my platform, however small, to expose the syndicate. They'd protect me, but it wouldn't be easy. Karen and her cronies would come for me, hard. As he spoke, I heard the crunch of gravel again, then a new voice, male, gruff, unfamiliar. I peeked through the blinds and saw a man in a cheap suit, arguing with Elise, his hands gesturing wildly. Karen stood beside him, smirking like she'd won the lottery. My gut twisted. He wasn't just some homeowners association lackey. He was one of them. The meeting ended with a handshake and a promise. Reynolds left through the back, his SUV slipping into the dusk like a ghost. I stood alone in my cabin, the silence deafening, the weight of what I'd agreed to settling into my bones. Karen's voice echoed in my memory, her threats now laced with a darker truth. I wasn't just fighting her anymore. I was fighting a machine. 2 weeks later, the story broke. My name was in the papers, my novel suddenly trending on obscure corners of the internet. The syndicate's deals unraveled, one dirty thread at a time. Karen's fall was the sweetest. Turns out, she'd been taking kickbacks, funneling money through the Homeowners Association to pressure owners into selling. The feds raided her McMansion, and the footage of her screaming as they cuffed her played on every local news channel. I watched it from my porch, a glass of bourbon in my hand, the forest whispering its approval. Justice doesn't always feel good, but it feels right. I'd spent years running from the world, hiding in my cabin, thinking I could escape. But sometimes, standing your ground, staring down the Karens and the syndicates and the greed, changes everything. The mountains taught me that, and I'd never let anyone take that from me again.